Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and our subject today is weight loss and weight control. And I have a passion about this subject. I've written an article on it. And what I'm going to tell you is also a compliment to the website. So if you want it in writing, go to the website, and there it is under articles by me, Dick Goldberg. I hope to lay this out in a very clear, simple, understandable, and convincing way based on studies by Harvard and Mayo and other sources that will help you be very confident and clear about how to take the weight off you want to take off and how to keep it off permanently. So, let's get to work. Let's start with this simple idea that somehow people don't get. Diets don't work. Well, they do in a way of taking weight off in the short run, but the reason they don't work is almost everybody who goes on them then goes back to their normal eating habits that cause them to be overweight. So people are euphoric 3 weeks after their grapefruit diet or high-protein diet or whatever because they're 10 pounds less or 5 pounds less. And then slowly they gain it back and then they go on another diet again. So great to lose the weight you want to lose, but then you have to change your behavior permanently to keep it off. I don't even think I have to convince you that. You know that. Secondly, now this is pretty simple too. It's all about calories. In the end, it's not whether you ate grapefruit or high fat or low fat. It's all about the calories you consumed and, of course, about the calories expended. A 2-year study at the Harvard School of Public Health proved this. So when you go on this study, by the way, is quite recent. It does not really matter. I mean, for health, if all you ate was a candy and only ate 1,000 calories a day, you'd lose weight, but you wouldn't be a healthy human being. So certainly a balanced, healthy diet is important. But when it comes to weight loss, it's calories. So when you go on a diet and lose weight, and let's say you go on the high-protein diet, and you say, I ate like a pig, I ate tons of food and tons of calories, this study would indicate you might have eaten tons for a day or two, but sooner or later you get kind of tired of that steak, and you start eating less steak, and you consume less calories, and that's why you lose weight. It's all about calorie restriction to lose the weight, and then calorie really control and monitoring to maintain the weight loss. So, how about this one? Oh, I eat so little, but no matter what I do, I can't lose weight. It's my metabolism. Well, the Mayo Clinic, in an article on weight control and metabolism, have shown that it's very rare that metabolism is the reason you can't lose weight. It sounds good. People believe that. And once in a blue moon, metabolism is the culprit, but very, very seldom. What about self-deceit? That kind of fits in with it. I would suspect that the people who say, oh, I can't lose weight as my metabolism, are really not being honest with themselves about how many calories they consume. They might forget about the volume or the treats they took or the donut they ate walking by the neighbor's desk this morning. And if they kept track of their calories, well, they would have to face the ugly truth that the culprit is them, not their metabolism. Speaking of accountability, the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago had a study on when someone loses weight, who's most likely to keep it off. By the way, most people, a very high percentage of people, gain it back. But if you're going to keep it off, they looked at 7 different methods people followed to try to keep their weight off, and the one that was far and away the most successful had to do with getting on the scale every day. Now, why is that such a good method? Doesn't mean most people succeeded. They might have just witnessed their failure at getting the weight back, but still had the highest percentage success rate. It's because the scale keeps you honest, accountable, and you can't deceive yourself. Knowledge, the knowledge of food choice, the knowledge of calories is very important. Example, Mayor Bloomberg in New York got a law passed a few years ago that all restaurants that have more than, I guess, 10 or 15 outlets have to post calories on their menu. That works. People then are faced with the truth about the calories they're consuming. For example, I walked into a Starbucks in New York City, and it was kind of fun to look at the pastries where they had to tell you what the calories were. And the low-fat blueberry muffin was almost identical in calories to the regular blueberry muffin. But before you got that information, you might have thought, oh, am I doing good for my body by consuming these low-fat muffins, as you're piling in 430 calories instead of the 450 you might have in the regular muffin. A study that you can find in my article indicates that when fast food stores clearly post the content of their food, the average person reduces their calorie intake from previous visits by 18 to 20%. So I think Mayor Bloomberg is on the right track. But for you to be successful at losing weight, and I think even more so on keeping it off, you have to have a good understanding of calories, because that is the bottom line. So how do you learn about calories? Well, one is when you go grocery shopping, make a habit of picking up the package you're about to buy and look on the back, and almost always there's an indication of calories per serving. And be careful. Sometimes you'll pick up a muffin and it says calories per serving 200, and you think that's not bad, but often it says servings per container 3. They do get you that way and make themselves look better than they are by doing that. So that's a 600-calorie muffin. And another thing you might do, which I'm going to talk about a little later, is go to the net and go to a site called Lose It. You can certainly get this on your smartphones if you have a smartphone. And it's a terrific site, and we'll talk a little later about how useful it is to knowing how to lose weight, but it also has almost every food in the world in the calorie content. The net, of course, is a rich resource for finding this out. If you don't deal with the net, you can buy a little book which you can carry around with you with calories. And after you do get familiar with it, it starts becoming second nature. Some of the biggest drawbacks to not being successful with weight control is not having the knowledge of calories and not being honest with yourself. So if we combine these two, here's what I suggest you do. The first thing is at 2 o'clock every day, or after lunch, think of everything you've eaten up to that point in the day. And then with the help of an app on the smartphone or a book, or your knowledge, write down all the calories you've eaten and write down that number and put it in your pocket and keep it. And then do the same thing before you go to bed. How many calories have you had since 2 o'clock? It's hard to recall everything before you go to bed, but I found that if you do it twice a day, you can pretty well do this. So here is half the equation. If you do this, you'll know how many calories you consumed. This keeps you accountable, and it keeps you honest with yourself. It's so easy to grab a cookie or a cupcake or whatever at the office or wherever you are and just kind of not pay attention and guzzle it down and be not mindful. When you have to write it down, it does affect your behavior. You kind of know, oh, I'll have to write down those 300 calories in that cookie. Is it worth it? And you might not eat it when you otherwise would if you didn't have to write down the calories. What about the other half of this equation? Exercise. Exercise counts too. But then how do you know how many calories you burn? Well, here is some information most people might not know. When you walk or run, calories are burnt not based on how fast you run, but it's how far you go. So in other words, if you run a mile in 5 minutes, you're super fast. You don't burn any more calories than if you stroll that mile in a half hour. You're just taking longer to burn those calories. For me, it's about 100 calories. If you're very big, it's a little more than 100 calories because you're moving more mass. And if you're very tiny, it's a little less. But that's a rough gauge, about 100 calories a mile. But then how do you know how many miles you cover in a day? You know, some people do walk a lot in their day-to-day job. Some people sit at a desk and hardly walk at all. So here's how you do it. You can thank Tommy Thompson, the ex-Secretary of Health, for this under George Bush. He came up with the 10,000 steps a day plan, that Americans for health should move 10,000 steps a day. Well, how do you know how many steps you're taking? Simple. Simple. A pedometer. You wear a pedometer. Put it on when you get up in the morning and take a look at it before you go to bed at night. And it'll tell you how many steps you took. About 2,000 steps is a mile for a person of average size. The bigger you are, the further you go with each step. But a rough approximation of calories burned is every 2,000 steps is about 100 calories. Now, you could get more scientific about this, and maybe it's 92 or 108, depending on your size and your stride. But I would suggest that if you think in terms of 100 calories a day, you're going to be pretty close. And if you hit the mark, you're going to lose your weight. So how do you know how many calories a day to maintain your weight, how many calories a day to lose a pound a week, 2 pounds a week, half a pound a week? The best source I know of, again, involves technology. It's an application, as I mentioned earlier, called Lose It. You can get that on smartphones. And on it, it shows you how to set your goals, and it will tell you, ask you if your height, your weight, your sex, and your age. And from that, it will tell you if you want to lose a half a pound a week, how many calories you have to consume, a pound a week, a pound and a half a week. For example, if you are female and 190 pounds and you want to get to 160 and you want to lose a pound a week, you just have to you have to eat 1,600 calories a day. If you want to maintain your 190 pounds, you have to eat 1,900 calories a day, and no more. A male at 6'2", weighing 190, can eat 2,481 calories a day. Just some examples. But if you go to that, it'll show you how much you have to eat every day. So now you know how to figure out calories burned. You know how to figure out how many calories, assuming you lose it. And if not that, I'm sure there's other things on the computer you can find. And Google how to lose weight -calories, and others will come up for you. So you can find out on this, or ask, everyone has some friend they know who has a smartphone, ask them to look up Lose It for you, and give them the 99 cents it costs for the app, and you're in business. And it'll tell you how many calories you have to eat to drop the weight you want. You can figure out how long it'll take you. If you go for a pound a week and you want to lose 30 pounds, it'll take you 30 weeks. And then, here is the gold standard. Every night, you now know you have to write down your calories. Then you also write down your steps. If you took 10,000 steps, you walked about 5 miles. You worked about 500 calories off. Now, the first 100, unfortunately, are just for living. So you get to subtract 400 calories, because that's your excess over 2,000. You did 8,000 steps over your basic living. So you get to subtract 400 steps from what you ate, and that's your net calorie consumption. You look at what you had to eat to lose your half a pound or a pound a week, and hopefully you're at that mark, or better. So if you had to take in, say, 1,400 calories a day to lose the weight you want each week, and you ate 1,800, but you did 10,000 steps, you get to subtract 400 from the 1,800 you ate for a net of 1,400. Goody, goody, you're right on the mark, you made it. What I find from doing this is that it makes you accountable on 2 levels. You become much more mindful of what you're putting in your mouth. You become much more aware of the calories and everything you eat, and so you make better choices. It's kind of like shopping for bargains. Oh my gosh, is that brownie for 500 calories worth it versus eating cantaloupe for 80 calories and having just as much pleasure, maybe, and having room for more candy later. And so you start making mindful choices. You also become more cognizant of moving, and boy, that's good for your health. Now, strolling and getting a mile walk in and burning 100 calories is very good for you, but it is not, of course, nor do I mean it to be the answer to all good health, because aerobic exercise is certainly the gold standard, which is running or moving faster. So, however, how far you go is the gold standard of weight control, calorie consumption. So if you just walk but you move the same amount of distance but perhaps take longer, you'll still lose the same amount of weight. But in the end of the day, it's calories consumed minus calories burned. What if you have a really bad day? You go to a wedding and you just lose control and eat a ton of food. You're going to want to not write it down. I encourage you to write down every day and forgive yourself for your sins. If you go over, if you have a 2,800 calorie day or a 3,500 calorie day, and I have written those down from time to time, you'll feel bad, but you'll be a little more incentivized the next day to get on the program. And more than anything, it makes you mindful. So you might not reach for the second piece of birthday cake because you know you're going to have to write it down. And it can be a little practice in self-forgiveness and then getting back on track because you just might have some bad days in the process. Another essential thing to losing weight, but more important, keeping it off, is doing what they said in the Wall Street Journal. For the rest of your life, getting on that scale every day. I did lose the weight I wanted to, and I was surprised to see how thin I had to get, how much weight I had to lose to get to really being slender and not having a gut. But I have been weighing myself every day, and I continued this method of writing down these things for a couple years, and finally I said, let's see what happens if I don't write it down. It's working out okay, and decided and would suggest that if you do gain 3 pounds over your ideal weight, then go back to writing it down every day. But it's become an ingrained habit, having doing this long, of being more mindful of what I eat and intuitively knowing when I am getting off track. How fast this works for you, how far you get is up to you. But if you follow this method, I think it's almost a tautology. It'll work. You thought to yourself, well, I don't have to do this because I'm not a walker or a runner. I swim or I bicycle. Well, even if you do that, again, the magic of the net, you can look up calories consumed for bicycling and swimming and add those to the calories that your pedometer is showing. And you can still do the gold standard every night. Remember, again, this article is available to you on this website of Insights with Dick Goldberg. And I would love to hear from you if you have any questions or want to share with me your success or your anger. Please email me, and I'd be glad to read it and get back to you if you want. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me on the next edition of Insights.